This is the Composer Corner. Composer Corner.
Hi everyone, I'm Annabelle and I'm a third year music student. I play cello, I also love singing and songwriting, and I play a little bit of guitar and piano because of that. So I'm really excited today as I'm absolutely in love with the composer and the music that I'm about to chat about. So welcome to my little podcast on a composer called Rachmaninoff. His full name is actually Sergei Rachmaninoff, and he was born on 1st of April 1873 in northwest Russia. So Rachmaninoff was a composer during the Romantic period, and he's sometimes called the last composer of the Romantic period because he composed really late on in that period. For reference, the Romantic period ran from 1830 to 1900 roughly, and he was composing from the end of the period into the 1900s. So his career fully began when he finished at music college at Moscow Conservatory, a music school in Moscow, where he had just composed a huge amount of music for piano in his years there. His passion for piano music continued, but like many other composers and creative minds, he suffered from something called failure and struggled with his self-confidence quite a lot. Some of his first compositions did not result in success, but he needed this time to build up the confidence to let the public hear some of his more famous and well-known and more loved compositions, which I'm about to mention. So I'm now going to give you some background and information about my favourite piece of Rachmaninoff's that he composed. And this piece is called Piano Concerto No. 2. He wrote 4 concertos. I'll quickly say that. A concerto is a piece for solo instrument, or up to a few instruments, and orchestra. So he wrote Piano Concerto No. 2 during this period of time when he was trying to recover from his previous failures, and it's an absolute masterpiece. Without further ado, let me give you more information about the piece, and I highly recommend you go listen to it right after this podcast, as it's an incredible, incredible piece. The concerto was first performed in 1897, and it's in 3 parts or movements. It begins with a really dramatic solo piano introduction, which then goes into the main theme and melody. This theme, or main melody, gets repeated and developed. The second movement is the most iconic movement and most well-known and loved piece of Rachmaninoff's, I'd say. If you haven't heard it before, you might have heard the theme in the song All By Myself, originally by Eric Carmen, or you might have heard the cover version by Celine Dion. That song has the same chord progression and similar aspects of the melody of this second movement of Rachmaninoff's, and that was basically used for inspiration for this song All By Myself. The second movement of Rachmaninoff's has a really pretty flute solo in it, and the piano adds to the texture with some really nice and satisfying chords beneath that. In the third and final movement, the main melody from the first movement is repeated again in an even more dramatic and agitated way, where it builds lots of tension into the music. The concerto is in C minor, which is personally actually my favourite key in music to listen to or play my instrument in. I mean, I play cello and so much romantic music is actually written in C minor for me. And to be honest, it's just a lovely key to play in, I'd say, as it can sound really dark and dramatic and just holds so much depth. Other pieces that Rachmaninoff has written include Rhapsody on a theme of Paganini and Symphony No. 3. Those are the most common ones. He composed 3 symphonies. Oh, and by the way, a symphony is a piece written for orchestra in 4 sections or movements. As well as being a famous composer, he was also a really well-known piano player and played some really difficult pieces by composers like Bach, Beethoven, Schubert, and Mozart. If you haven't heard of those composers, I really recommend you check them out as well, as they're really key composers of his period and also the period before that. So he played these difficult pieces by these composers, and that's why he was named a virtuoso pianist of his time, because he could play to a really high standard. This is hardly surprising, as he was brought up with a musical family around him, because his father and his grandfather were both pianists as well. So he was exposed to piano at a young age and had that support around him. Music must have definitely been in his blood. Well, I want to thank you for listening today. I hope this has inspired you to want to go away and have a listen to some of his pieces, particularly one of his piano concertos. Although it must have been really difficult and complex to compose, his music is actually really easy listening, so I'd really recommend it. I mean, I listen to it when I want something relaxing on in the background, or you could hear his music at a classical concert, as it's amazing to hear live. So I do hope you've all enjoyed this podcast, and happy listening.
This is the Composer Corner. Composer Corner.